Welcome back, friends. We are now inch closer to develop Angular application. But before we get into the real exercise of how to develop Angular application, we must be ready with all the resources which will make our life easier as a developer. These resources could be in form of software or in form of some of the knowledge or some of the technologies. So what we are going to cover into this particular session is what are the different prerequisites which are required to learn HTML, what are the different softwares required and how to install those softwares to create Angular applications, upgrading your existing Angular version, and we are going to write a small Angular application which we are going to explain in our next session. So, to be able to develop application in Angular, you must have some prior knowledge of some basic technologies. You need not to be expert in these technologies though, but as you are going to build a web application, you should have good knowledge of HTML and CSS, which will help you to design the templates in Angular. You should also have knowledge of JavaScript as Angular is a JavaScript based framework. To write the business logic in Angular, you should have fair knowledge of TypeScript. So if you are already familiar with JavaScript, learning TypeScript should not be difficult for you as TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. So do not worry about the current versions of TypeScript at this moment. As we move ahead with the basic knowledge of TypeScript, you are able to learn many things about it. It is better to have some knowledge about EA6, which is ECMA script 6, which is a standard for scripting language. Reason that you should know ECMA script is the process of debugging your Angular application. The browsers on which your application is going to load does not understand syntax of JavaScript or TypeScript, so compiler transpiles it to ACMA so that browser can actually read it. So while debugging the code, you get to see the ECMA code and not the TypeScript code in the debugger. So having the knowledge of ECMA will make you more comfortable to read the code or to debug the code on the browser. Once we know what are the different prerequisites which are required for Angular, let us now try to understand what are the different softwares we need our system to build and deploy the applications of Angular. The Angular requires current LTS version, that is long-term support version of Node.js. Node.js is considered to be build and development tool for Angular. Along with this, there is a npm client that you need to install, which is a package manager which get installed along with Node. To support Angular CLR command, you need to also install Angular CLI. We're going to write our code and we also need some editor to write the Angular code and which might give you some helper utilities to understand the code or make your code more readable. And for that, we are going to use one of the editor which is called as uh, Visual Code. Of course, there are multiple editors or IDEs like Item or Bracket, Westorm, Sublime Text, etc. But for our course, we are going to use Visual Studio Code Editor. And it also gives you a console where you can execute Angular CLI command. That is additional thing that you can get by using this uh, particular Visual Studio Code. So let us now see how do I install all these softwares. The first and the foremost step is to install Node.js on your system. So to download the code, download the Node.js installer, you need to visit nodejs.org and download the current LTS installer. After downloading it and install it in your system, you will be getting the different versions of the node or the current version of node. And to check up that node, you are going to fire up the command node slash or node dash v. Along with Node, you need to also install the npm package on your system. But good thing is that you do not need to install it separately. Node installs internally npm on your system. So if you want to make sure that where the node is installed on your system and npm installed on your system, you can open up any of the terminal and fire the command node-v and npm-v. So in my system, if I go to my console, you will see that this is the console which is present. Of course, this is the console of Visual Code, but over here you could see there is node dash v, and I do have this node having the version of 10.15.3 as if a current version, and then I do have this npm dash v, which give me version of current npm tool. So as I told you, npm is a package and manage tool which is going to be used to bundle up a lot of libraries. Once you install node and npm successfully, your next step is to install Angular CLI. Angular CLI is a command line interface tool for developing Angular application. It is used for starting up the application, setting up the configuration, building up the component, services, routing system, etc. It is also used to install the third-party libraries like Bootstrap inside your application. So to install your CLI, open up your terminal and you can fire up a command npm install angular slash CLI. So if I go to my command prompt now, I would say npm install @angular slash CLI, and this will install the Angular CLI on your system. So it will take a couple of minutes to install. And if you do have already Angular installed on your system, you can update your Angular CLI by using npm update @angular slash CLI latest, which will update your Angular for current version. And once you install every Angular CLI, you can also find out what is your current version of Angular by firing up a command nd dash dash versions, where ng is a command by which you are going to talk to your Angular commands, which is nothing but Angular CLI components, using which you will be able to communicate with your Angular framework. So let me just go back here and check that whether it is completed. As I told you, it will take some time to install all the libraries. Followed by that, you will be also needing your Visual Studio Code editor. So to install your Visual Studio Code editor, you can go to this code.studio visualstudio.com/download, and you can install your current version of Visual Studio Code, and that is what I am having over here. This is my current Visual Studio Code. Now my Angular CLI has been installed. If at all, as I told you that I want to check out my version, I could go ng version, and this will give you current version of your Angular. Now once all the application support and all the files and all the dependencies are created, your next job and the important job is to create a simple hello world application. So this is the version, as I talked about, that when you give this command ng CLI, you will see that you are going to get current version of this Angular. That the version I'm getting currently is 10.0. Then then your version of RxJS is 6.5.5, which is internal dependency which is added in the Angular CLI. So these are the different initial commands that you need to give. So as I told you, what you need to do now is you need to create the basics of application, which is called as hello world application. Now to create hello world application, you have to open up Visual Studio Code, open up terminal window in Visual Code, and go to your working directory and fire up a command which is called as ng new hello world. So I'm going to go here, and in the Angular training folder, I'm going to give the command ng new hello world. So this will do a lot of let's say pulling dependencies process, creation of a bootstrap applications, and all these things which we need to understand as and when we proceed further. It will ask you a couple of questions, that do you need to have Angular routing, as if now I'm going to say no. Then it will ask you that which kind of a CSS we are going to use. So I'm going to use a plain CSS. uh, and then it will try to install a few of the files. It will install a couple of files like app component.ts, app component.css and a lot of other stuffs related with testing and all these things. It's a linear process, so it will take a bit of a time, and then after you create this, you will be able to see this application. One thing which I missed over here is I need to make sure that my internet is on. So I'm going to make my internet on first. So let me do that so that Angular can pull the file systems from the website of Angular framework. I'm going to initialize my internet setting, and then I'm going to fire up this command. So I'm going to fire it up again. So ng new hello world. This will regenerate the application. So I'm going to say Angular routing no plain CSS, and I'm going to give enter. And it says that hello world application is already present. So let me create another simple application, or let's say ng new hello world. I hope this application is not created. So we'll ask you for routing, say no CSS, basic CSS, that's it. So it will create your hello world application. So we need to wait till it gets over. Okay, so finally our application is created. So I have created this application in the folder called as D drive Angular training. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this file and say open up a folder. And if I open up a folder, you will see that in Angular training there is a folder which is created as hello world, which I'm going to open up, and this will show you different files which are created in that particular project. So your uh, Visual Studio Code will be reinitialized, and it will load all the files which are present into that folder, and this is the basically folder which will be displayed to you. Of course, we are going to discuss what are the different file systems into that and what are their importance in our next session. But in this session, what we are going to do, the last thing is how do I execute this particular application. So for that, I'm going to go to view, and I'm going to go to terminal. And in this terminal, you will see that the terminal is opened with your current folder name. That means you're into that folder already, which is called as hello world. And I'm going to say ng serve. This ng serve command will render your application, or it will bootstrap your application, and it will load it on your browser. Similar to your ng ng new, this will take a bit of a time to launch your application. So we need to wait for a couple of minutes again, and then we'll come back to see how to see the output on the browser. You could see that your project is getting ready. It is building all the things, it is compiling all the things, and once it gets to 100%, we'll be able to launch it on the browser. Right then, so it is compiled successfully, and it is giving you a Angular Live Development Server is listening on localhost 4200. Open up your browser on HTTP localhost 4200. So 4200 is the default port number which is allocated to your Angular. So I'm going to go to my browser now, and I'm going to say localhost colon 4200. Fire up this command, and you will see that the basic application is launched. Now there is a lot of stuff into this application as it's now, because Angular provides a lot of material to read and all this thing which is connected with the server of Angular from where you could read. That's the reason this whole page is designed. But you can remove the entire content and make this page as a blank, which we are going to see in our next session, and then we can rebuild our application. In any case, if you feel that your 4200 port number is um, utilized by some other kind of application and you want to change your port number, then you can fire up the command ngserve and you can give the command, let's say 4201. And if you say this, your same application will be launched by using port number 4201. So you can launch your application by saying http localhost colon 4201. So this is the way basically you will be able to create your hello world application and run that application using your CLI command. So that's it guys for installation of your Angular app and how do I launch my Angular app on the browser. See you soon in the next session where we are going to talk in detail about this project and we are going to discuss what is architecture of Angular.